All right, we are finally ready for concept 3 of our first unit, which is on macromolecules. Macromolecules is something that we will talk about for the rest of the year, especially in the first semester. So the things that you learn now, I'm not going to let you forget until we're all the way done. Whether or not you have realized it, macromolecules are something that you're actually very familiar with in your everyday life. We're going to define them as large organic molecules using the word organic, meaning that they contain the molecule carbon, and they make up all living things. So we are saying carbon-based is making them organic. So not in the sense that you would use the word organic like at the grocery store, but simply because they contain carbon. So things that are macromolecules, there's 4 of them. So we have carbs and lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Those are the 4 things that we have that fit in our macromolecules category. We're going to talk about what each of these things are, but we absolutely cannot live without them. They are required for all living things, and we have to have them in order to stay alive. They are necessary for us, which means that they run our body. They're holding information on how to run our body, and they also provide the energy for us to run our body. So very important, which is why we're talking about them at the beginning of biology. As I said on the previous slide, pretty much everything that we learn for the rest of the semester will relate back to our macromolecules. So once you think you're, gonna learn it for the quiz and forget it, think again. So we're first going to look at the structure of them, and structurally, most macromolecules are made of polymers, and polymers are made out of monomers, which we'll talk about what those terms mean more. So we're starting with the basic structure of all macromolecules, whether that is carbs, lipids, proteins, or nucleic acids. So the very first structure we're talking about is the word monomers. And monomers are these small basic subunits. So we want to think about these about like bricks or a word. So if you're forming a house, you're going to build it with individual pieces of bricks. If you're forming a sentence or if you're writing a story, you're writing that with individual little words, adding them all together to make the big picture. So monomers are the small units, which then brings us to our next piece, which are polymers. And polymers are the more larger and complex structures, and these are made up of our monomers. So now we can think about our brick wall or the sentence that we're forming. We are making our brick wall by adding a bunch of our bricks together, which you can see in our example here. So we have a brick being added together to make a brick wall. So we have our monomer, a bunch of monomers together makes our polymer, the brick wall. The first macromolecule that we're going to talk about today is our carbohydrates, which one you are very familiar with. So the main function for carbohydrates is energy storage, but we're specifically going to talk about the fact that it is short-term energy storage. So we'll look at some examples later on of what carbohydrates are, but an example would be pasta. And a common example of it being used as short-term energy is that if we have our cross-country runners in here, they often do something that is called carb loading or pasta loading the night before a race because it's going to give them a big supply of this fast, short-term energy. Besides energy, though, there are also other uses for carbohydrates, so things like structure. We use them for transport and signaling. So an easy example on the structure-wise is things in plants. So plants, all of their structure, any fiber that you have in your diet is from carbohydrates. So they're not all bad. We actually need them in all fruits and vegetables. So that brings us to the things that carbs are found in. And they are generally considered to be sugars and starches, but we have to keep in mind that sugars are in all of our fruits and they're in all of our vegetables. So the only way to technically eat a carb-free diet is if you were a carnivore and you ate only meat, because our pasta, our breads, anything with sugar, fruits, and vegetables all contain carbohydrates. So as we continue to talk about carbs, let's first talk about the monomer term used to describe carbs. And this is a really long word, but we call this single sugar molecule a monosaccharide. Monosaccharide. So things that are monosaccharides are things like glucose, which is the blood sugar that you have, so fuels for your cells, galactose, which is the sugar in milk, and fructose, which is the sugar in fruit. So if you notice, most of these simple sugars end in the word ose, O-S-E. So that's just kind of a hint for you that if you see something end in ose, that it is most likely a sugar. The polymer term used for our carbohydrates is similar, but it is polysaccharide. So we have just changed out this mono for poly, so our polymer is the polysaccharide. And this is a large sugar molecule. So remember, we're adding our monomers together to get our polymers. So examples of our polymers are things like starches, glycogen, and cellulose. So if you remember other uses for carbohydrates besides energy, one of those things was for structural support, and that's cellulose. A really good example of this is celery. Most people don't like eating celery because of how stringy it is, but that's because it contains so much cellulose. And the last thing to talk about is the amount of energy that is provided from carbohydrates. And they give us 4 calories per gram of carbohydrates. So your body can access and break it down easily, and thus it is typically the first thing your body will break down to get energy when you need it. So this is, again, why we do the pasta or carb loading, is because it's broken down really easily, and so it's a first thing you'll use. It's really fast and easy to get the source of energy. So when you're out running, you know that your body can break down your carbs really fast. So something to talk about is that if you don't include carbs in your diet, you can actually be inhibiting how well you run. You can be inhibiting your brain function. Your body is dependent on carbs and you need them. Now, as we move on to lipids, let's first talk about and clarify what the heck a lipid is. So based on our pictures here, you can see we have peanut butter, we have avocados, and we have olive oil. All of these 3 things have in common the fact that they are fats. They may all be healthy fats. I didn't put butter or, these are all good, healthy fats. And that's what lipids are. These are the fats and oils. So the function of our lipids, or the main function at least, is energy storage. But we have to specify the fact that we are talking about long-term energy storage. So they're going to give you energy that's going to last over a longer period of time. So really something great to think about here is that we already said your carbs give you short-term energy. So if we're trying to find a breakfast that would give you energy now, but would also help you last throughout the day, a really great option would be have toast. And on your toast, you could include peanut butter for your long-term energy storage, or you could have avocado toast for a source of long-term energy storage. Other uses for our lipids is that it's fat. It's the fat on your body, so we can use them for insulation, protection, and structure. So we know that our fat insulates us, it helps, it keeps us warm, but it's also used for protection and structure. So these are very vital things. Your body actually doesn't go through all of its functions and through all of its normal processes if you don't have enough fat on your body. So as we said, we find lipids in fats, oils, and phospholipids. These are special structures that are found in the cell membrane as well as in steroids. So now as we talk about lipids, if we look at the monomer, or the small piece that makes up our lipids, this term is called fatty acids. So it's easy to remember because our lipids are actually fats. That's one of the examples. And so that's this little structure here. And then our polymer for fatty acids is our triglycerides. So tri means 3. So you can kind of see that in the example of our polymer over here. You can see 3 of these fatty acids being put together to make this triglyceride. And then if we want to talk about the energy storage of lipids, they're fats, and so they are giving us 9 calories per gram. This is more than we had in our carbs. So when your body runs out of carbs, the next easy to access thing, it will break down lipids for its next source of energy. So we're going to continue to talk about those phospholipid structure because they are special, and we're going to continue to see them in our next sections. So if we look at the structure, it is made up of 2 fatty acids and 1 phosphate group, which we can see down here. These are our fatty acids and 1 phosphate group. So we're going to call these heads and tails. So the head portion is hydrophilic, and it is made up of the phosphate group. The tail portion that's hydrophobic is made up of the fatty acids. And we can also think about this in the fact that we know that our tails are fatty acids, so things like oils do not mix with water, so that makes them hydrophobic. So our tail portion, as we just said, is made of fat, so that makes it the hydrophobic portion, and the head is the hydrophilic portion. So if we look at our phospholipids in their actual structure of the cell membrane, they have their 2 layers, and we call these 2 layers the cell membrane or the plasma membrane of our cells. And we also can say that they are selectively permeable, and selectively permeable means that it's letting only selectively letting some of the things into the cell. So you can see here that we have our 2 layers. We have a layer of heads on the bottom and a layer of heads on the top. Same with this picture over here.